let's discuss policy response and implementation put in place by the federal government to cushion the effect of COVID-19. I have the partner and head transfer pricing group, Anderson Tax, Dr. Josh Bamfo. Thank you, Dr. Josh, for joining us. He's joining us via Skype from Lagos Island. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Doctor, let's start with, before the pandemic, we saw a country like Nigeria struggling with weak recovery. Now this has happened, and we see the figures now coming out, talking about going into recession and all of that. How would you, first of all, assess the impact of COVID-19 on the Nigerian economy?
First and foremost, for us to assess the impact of COVID-19, as you rightly said, we need to look at where we are or where we were at the beginning of the year. Clearly, we were just about coming out of a recession in 2016, which was due to the oil price shocks of 2014 and 15. That actually led us into a recession in 2016, and we recovered in 2017. At the end of 2019, the economy was growing at around 2.27%. Projections for 2020, IMF initially was 2.5%. Later on, that one was it was revised downwards to 2.0%. So clearly, we had a fragile economy entering into 2020, hoping that with better growth policies, we could actually continue to grow to the kind of rate we used to enjoy in 2014, which was on the average around 6.3%. Then we had COVID-19 pandemic, global pandemic. Now we need to then assess the potential impact of this on the economy. To do that, you need to understand the sources of the adverse economic shocks to the Nigerian economy. There are two major sources of shocks. The first being the exogenous shocks, which is external to the economy, and clearly is the fact that with the decrease in demand for crude oil by big trading partners such as China due to COVID-19, we've had the oil price plummet from around $60 per barrel to around $30 per barrel. We know that OPEC is trying to cut down on oil supply in order to push the price up. But for now, we have the price around $30 per barrel. We know that Nigeria as an economy is highly dependent on the sale of crude oil to generate revenue to actually implement its budget, that's around 70%, as well as to have access to forex, around 90%, to help businesses source forex in order to import relevant inputs for their businesses. So that was the first shock that hit the economy around January. Then you have disruption in supply chain due to disruptions in countries such as China, which are our trading partners. So if you're in the trade sector, your source of purchase of final goods to distribute in the Nigerian economy is then curtailed. If you're in the manufacturing sector, your source of getting access to intermediate inputs as well as plant and equipment is also curtailed. So that has also had an adverse impact on the economy. Then there are internal shocks due to the measures that government had to implement in order to curb the spread of the disease. The first measure was to curb the import of COVID diseases into the country. So there was a suspension of international travels. That directly hit sectors such as aviation and hoteling. Then the second measure was the ban of large gatherings, which also hit business such as restaurants, entertainment industry, and so on and so forth. The last one is the lockdown in major states such as Lagos State, Ogun, as well as in Abuja. And that also has had adverse impact on businesses that focus on non-essential products or services. So if you add all these five sources, the adverse impact of COVID is clearly going to be worse than the adverse impact of the crude oil shock in 2014-15 that led to the initial recession. So clearly we have a significant problem on our hands, which means that whatever response government is going to implement has to be extraordinary to deal with an extraordinary problem.
Dr. Josh, talking about interventions now, before I look at the monetary side, let me look a bit on the fiscal side. We see a cut in budget. We see projections. Crude oil price also dropped from $57 to $30. We see small businesses being exempted from company income tax. We see issues around adjustment of our foreign exchange rates, even the I&E windows. These were things the government came out to do immediately. How well do you see all of this helping us move on?
Good. I mean, to really analyze whether these measures are going to be impactful, you need to take the monetary policy and fiscal policy together, because for the longest, if you look at in recent times, monetary policies has been the tools that the CBN has used to actually help the government deal with managing the economy. So the first reaction actually came from the Central Bank of Nigeria, which is CBN. And let me talk a little bit about that. So with that was making sure that you had credit facilities to targeted sectors of the economy. The first is the 50 billion naira facility, which was targeted to household sector and small and medium-sized enterprises. The challenge will be how they actually come up with clear modalities to make sure that it really gets to the targeted sectors. The second was a 100 billion naira facility to the health sector to assist with the procurement of medical equipment, medicines for the pharmacies, and other related stuff within the health sector. The third, which is very critical, is a 1 trillion credit facility to the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector is the second largest sector in terms of contribution to GDP in Nigeria after agriculture. And this sector has been struggling since the 2016 recession. And it's actually been recording marginal growth rates. And in some cases, for some quarters, they've actually had contractions. So it's been very critical that that sector was targeted and saved. Remember, manufacturing also employs a lot of people in this particular country. So those have been the targeted measures that have come from CBN. In addition to that, for all businesses that are already enjoying CBN intervention loans, they have an extra 1-year moratorium period, and the interest rate has been cut down from 9% to 5%. So those are significant measures that CBN has done from a monetary policy side. And as you rightly said, they've taken advantage of this particular period to actually take away the multiple forex windows and try to move to a single forex window. For example, the government rate has moved from 305 to 360, whereas the investors and exporters window has been collapsed to make it at par with what we see with the bureau de change, around 380, in some cases moving to around 400. So those are the measures that the CBN using monetary policy tools have actually implemented. Now, on the fiscal policy side, which is both the House, what the House has done, and what the executive arm of government, which is the Ministry of Finance, has done. Let's start with the House of Reps. What the House of Reps has done is to first and foremost recognize that businesses, when they are struggling, might have an incentive to lay off workers. So they've proposed an incentive so that businesses do not lay off workers by giving them 50% rebate of the personal income taxes they will have to remit on behalf of the employees. So that gives businesses an incentive not to lay off workers between 1st of March through to 31st of December. The second has been to help household sector by giving some relief in terms of their mortgage payment. So if you have a mortgage with the National Housing Fund, then you might have some moratorium period. Then lastly has been to take away some import duties on some medical equipment and medicine to help the health sector. So that has been the fiscal policy that is supposed to come out of Congress. It's been passed by the House of Representatives, and the Senate is taking a look at it. Finally has been what the Ministry of Finance is doing on the fiscal policy side. First has been the provision of a 500 billion naira COVID-19 crisis fund, intervention fund. And this is very critical because this is coming out of the recommendation from renowned international organizations such as African Union, IMF, World Bank, and so on. So what this is going to do is, should we have a wider spread of these cases, government can then, and federal government can then tap into this fund, intervention fund, and make it available to states in order to improve their healthcare facilities and then combat the spread of this disease. So these are all the things that both the Ministry of Finance is doing and the CBN has done. Lastly is the fact that because we are going to have a significant reduction in revenue from both the oil sector because of the oil price shocks, as well as from the non-oil sector because businesses are struggling and individuals are struggling, there's been the need for government to access funds from international financial institutions, and these funds are going to be concessional loans, meaning that the interest rates are going to be very low. The first has been from the World Bank, where the government has already tapped into a $9 million facility, which they've already made use of $8 million, so they have access to $82 million facility to help with the fight of this COVID. They also have started negotiating with World Bank for an additional $100 million for a similar reason. They also have access to loans from the IMF through the rapid credit facility that they've made available for developing countries to fight COVID. Thirdly, they also have access to funds from African Development Bank, which has made available a social bond which they got from the capital markets at a rate of 0.75%. Lastly, they have access to concessional funds from the Islamic development banks. So these are sources that can really help make up for the shortfalls that we expect in terms of the budget and in terms of funds to combat both the pandemic itself as well as the potential economic fallout. No. So for all these measures, we believe that they can make some decent impact in trying to curb the economic fallout.
I'm looking at all of this funding now because I've had developmental experts talk about this, and they are saying that at the moment, debt service to revenue ratio stands at about 60%, and that could be a little bit worrisome for a country like Nigeria.
Yeah, I mean, whether you like it or not, we are in a crisis situation, and that's the reason why I started by us appreciating, the enormity of the problem that we are facing. There's no way any country can sit idle and not do anything about the potential catastrophe to the economy when you implement these restrictive measures. U.S. has embarked on a $2 trillion stimulus fiscal policy. All right, that $2 trillion is not sitting idle somewhere. They are going to take it in the form of loans. So the truth of the matter is almost every government is tapping into some loans to actually support. Now, the good news is, rather than Nigeria going to the capital market and with a downgraded credit rating, accessing funds at higher interest rates, they have an opportunity to access some of these funds from these international financial institutions at very low rates, close to almost 0%. And that's a good thing. That means all you have to pay off will be the principal over some particular period of time. These are concessional loans. So first and foremost, they need to take advantage of these concessional loans. They cannot do without it. Even after that, there's still going to be a deficit to be financed. And the only way you can finance that deficit is to take a loan, unless you're able to generate the appropriate amount of the tax revenue. And you and I are aware, with oil prices down significantly, and with businesses struggling, and with individuals being laid off, that tax revenue collection projection is nowhere going to be achieved. So they need to finance it some way or the other, and the only way available will be to finance it with debt.
Already we are feeling that impact because the last figure from FRS showed that they were not meeting even when it had to do with just monthly revenue expected from the agency. Now let's look at some very decisive moves that are also expected. Let's look at the SIP, the Social Investment Program. Let's focus on the cash transfer. There's been a lot of issues around this. Some people are saying the mode of operation that's getting it done. Some are not happy with it. Now, that process, how can you assess it? How well would you say it's been carried out?
I think throughout this process, and I'm not going to be limited to that social transfer program alone, throughout this process, the biggest challenge is not going to be the policies or the measures that are being put out. The challenge is going to be the modalities in actually making sure that these funds are reaching the targeted sectors or the targeted people or the targeted businesses. Because you can have all these fancy policies and they are nice to have, but the way you can test whether it is going to be successful or not is going to be the process, the modalities, and how they are actually executed. So at the end of the day, we can actually assess the performance of this government in terms of how they manage, they manage this COVID-19 response, based more on how effective those measures were actually executed. So irrespective of all the measures that we've talked about and the targets that they've decided to actually help out, what is going to be very important is how they go about, executing. And it's not limited to Nigeria alone. Even in the US, after they passed this $2 trillion stimulus, what we've seen is that some of the amounts that were targeted to small businesses are not reaching those businesses that were supposed to have taken advantage of it. So it's a challenge that almost all governments are going to face. And the test of the success of all these measures or these programs is going to be on how they go about executing. And only time will tell whether the approach that they use is going to be deemed to be a success or a failure, because that is what we're going to measure them at the end of it.
In 1 minute, do you think the world, the global environment has actually learned something with regards to the effects of COVID-19? In 1 minute, 60 seconds.
Quick Truly, I think we should learn a lot. First and foremost, it's very clear that we cannot be isolated as nations. There's nothing like, a country being isolated from the rest. We are interrelated, we are globalized and world, so that any problem that hits one country, the probability that is going to spread to others is going to be significant. Secondly, for developing countries like Nigeria, it is told us that the health sector is so critical to the success of an economy. You need a healthy labor force. We cannot be oblivious of the fact that we need to make significant investment in the health sector. And finally, we need to be very proactive and make sure that we divest away from overdependence on crude oil. We said it after the 2016 recession, and it's a matter of time. We need to actually be very deliberate in divesting away from overdependence on crude oil.
Dr. Josh Bamfo, thank you very much for your time. Partner and head transfer pricing group, Anderson Tax. Thank you.